The studio lights dimmed, casting a soft glow across the sleek CNN set. The show was being broadcast live in over 60 countries. Phones buzzed across living rooms. Hashtags were already trending. Voices of Freedom, Karoline vs. Meghan, CNN Primetime. Emma Rivera, known for her no-nonsense tone and piercing questions, looked directly into the camera. "Good evening," she said. "Tonight, a conversation the nation can't ignore." On her right sat Meghan Markle, elegant, poised, but with something fiery in her eyes. On her left, Caroline Levitt, calm, still, pen in hand. The contrast was electric. Emma turned to Meghan. "Let's begin with the documentary," she said. "Your new project, Voices of Freedom, has already stirred powerful reactions. But it's your recent comment about former President Trump that sparked headlines around the world. You called him an enemy of women." "Meghan, why?" Meghan didn't hesitate. She leaned forward, her voice steady, smooth, and controlled. "Thank you, Emma," she began. "I'm here tonight not to attack individuals, but to speak for millions of women whose voices are often drowned out by power, policy, and politics." The audience sat still. She continued. "I've called President Trump a misogynist, not because it's politically convenient, but because the policies he pushed harmed real women. Tariffs that crushed factory jobs in towns like Dayton, cuts to reproductive care that left entire counties without clinics, funding slashed from maternal health programs. I met women in Ohio, Alabama, and Nevada, single mothers, veterans, nurses, who said, 'We were invisible.'" The room grew heavy with emotion. Meghan's voice softened. "Last year, I met a woman named Lillian. She lost her job after a trade deal fell through. Her prenatal clinic closed 2 months later. She was 6 months pregnant. She told me, 'I don't want pity. I want dignity. I want to raise my daughter in a country that doesn't punish her for being born female.' That broke me, and I knew I had to speak." Soft clapping began. It grew louder. A few people stood up. Meghan looked across the crowd and back at the camera. "This isn't about hating a man," she said. "It's about holding power accountable. It's about truth. And if calling out injustice makes me controversial, so be it. I'm not here for approval. I'm here for change." The applause surged again. Some audience members wiped away tears. Emma nodded, visibly moved. "Powerful words, Meghan. Thank you." She turned her gaze to the other chair. Caroline Levitt had been silent the entire time. Expression unreadable. Notes scribbled carefully. Lips pressed tight. Emma leaned slightly toward her. "Caroline," she said. "Your thoughts?" The camera zoomed in on Caroline's face. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she placed her pen down. She looked first at Meghan, then at the host, then at the camera. Her voice, when it came, was calm, but there was a weight behind it. "I believe in women," she said softly. "I've spent my career fighting for them, but I also believe in truth. And tonight, I heard a beautiful story, but also a dangerous one." A faint murmur stirred in the crowd. Caroline continued. "Meghan speaks with passion. I won't deny that. But passion without facts is like a ship without a compass. It moves hearts, yes, but it risks misleading them." She leaned forward slightly, her tone still even. "The policies mentioned tonight were complex. The tariffs, for instance, saved thousands of jobs in manufacturing districts that were about to disappear completely. Reproductive care? Under the Trump administration, more rural health centers were funded than ever before, just not through Planned Parenthood. And the Small Business Authority reported a 24% rise in women-led business applications during that same term. Those are the facts." A silence fell. She turned toward Meghan. "You met Lillian. I'm glad you told her story. but I met a woman named Claire. She owns a tire shop in Wisconsin. Her husband died during COVID. She said Trump's emergency business loans saved her from losing everything. She said, "He wasn't perfect, but he fought for me." So whose story counts more, Megan? Lillian's or Claire's? Megan blinked, caught off guard. Karoline continued, "You called Trump an enemy of women. That's a powerful label. But leadership isn't about enemies. It's about evidence. And if we want progress, we need more than narratives. We need accountability on all sides, even from voices as famous as yours." The audience was frozen. Phones lit up in the crowd. Some people clapped. Others remained still, watching closely. Emma looked between them both. "This conversation is far from over," she said. And she was right. Because in just 5 minutes, the internet would explode, and the world would start choosing sides. The silence that followed Karoline's response felt thick and alive. It wasn't just a pause. It was a shift. Megan sat still, her fingers gently pressed together in her lap, her expression unreadable. Across social media, the split was instant. One half praised Karoline's calm facts. The other accused her of lacking empathy. Emma Rivera, ever the composed moderator, sensed the tension rising. She turned slightly toward Megan. "You've heard Karoline's reply. Would you like to respond?" Megan leaned forward, measured and careful. "I appreciate facts," she said, her voice still steady. "But when facts are used to deny lived experience, they become weapons. Karoline, I don't doubt Claire's story. But acknowledging one woman's survival doesn't erase another's suffering." The crowd shifted. Quiet nods. A cough in the back row. Megan continued. "We can talk numbers, but we also need to ask, who is left behind in those numbers? The economy might have grown, yes, but for whom? For the women who still make 78 cents to the dollar? For the mothers working 2 jobs while reproductive clinics close across their counties?" Karoline didn't flinch. Megan pressed further. "What good is economic growth if it doesn't include equity? If women in Mississippi have to drive 200 miles for prenatal care? If working mothers are left out of child tax credit reforms? What kind of leadership is that?" Emma raised her hand gently. "Let's talk about the documentary itself," she said, guiding the moment back. "Megan, you titled it Voices of Freedom, but some critics, including members of Congress, have accused it of being too political. Was that your intention?" Megan straightened her shoulders. "Freedom is political," she said simply. "When a woman can't afford health care, when she's denied equal pay, when she can't get justice after assault, that's political. I didn't make it political. The system did." Karoline's eyes didn't leave her. Megan went on, voice rising. "If the truth is uncomfortable, that's not my fault. That's the cost of ignoring it for too long." Emma turned again. "Karoline, would you like to respond?" Karoline folded her hands. Her tone was quieter now, almost personal. "I don't believe in ignoring pain," she said. "But I do believe that if we're going to fix problems, we need to see the full picture." She looked to the audience. "There are places in America where opportunity is rising, where women are succeeding, not because they were rescued, but because they fought hard, took risks, and used the tools this country gave them. That includes Trump's policies, unpopular as they may be in some circles." She paused, then added, "We can have 2 truths at once. Yes, some women were hurt, but others were helped. Isn't that worth examining too?" The crowd was now fully engaged. Even the camera crew looked tense, tracking every shift in body language. Emma nodded slowly. "So what I'm hearing is this. Megan, your film aims to raise voices. Karoline, you're saying not all voices are being heard in the same way." "Yes," Karoline replied. "And I think it's dangerous when only some voices get amplified. because that turns advocacy into echo chambers. And Megan? Emma asked. I think when people are hurting, Megan said, her voice now soft but direct. They don't need to be told their pain is just one side. They need to be heard. That's the first step toward healing anything. Emma looked from one guest to the other. This, she said slowly, is what we hoped for tonight. Not shouting, but two women with very different views, confronting hard truths. The screen behind them flashed breaking news. Karoline versus Megan, the conversation. America wasn't ready for. Karoline glanced once at the monitor, then back at Megan. Megan, just for a second, looked away, toward the live audience, the faces watching, listening. Emma leaned into the moment. We'll continue this discussion after the break, she said. When we come back, international. Reaction to Voices of Freedom and what it means for U.S. foreign policy. As the lights dimmed for commercial, Megan and Karoline sat quietly, like two sides of a nation trying to decide what kind of truth it wanted to believe in. And, outside the studio, in millions of homes, the real debate had only just begun. The commercial break ended, but the tension had only grown. On social media, the clip of Karoline's sharp, unexpected response to Megan had already gone viral. One sentence, one post read, and the entire studio froze. Hashtags trended worldwide. Karoline clapback, Megan ease Karoline, freedom debate. Back inside the CNN studio, the lights brightened again. Emma Rivera sat between the two women, her voice now more deliberate. Welcome back. Before the break, we explored the clash of perspectives between Meghan Markle and Karoline Leavitt. Now, let's look outward. How is the world reacting to Voices of Freedom and this very conversation? The screen behind them flashed international headlines. BBC. Meghan confronts U.S. gender divide head-on. Al Jazeera. American women fight back. Karoline Leavitt pushes back with facts. Deutsche Welle. An interview that rattled Washington. Emma turned to Megan. Megan, your documentary has been praised internationally for raising awareness. But some foreign diplomats have said it paints the U.S. as unstable. Are you concerned this could hurt America's image abroad? Megan didn't hesitate. The truth doesn't hurt America, she said. Silence does. Other countries already know what's happening here. They watch our elections, our protests, our policies. Pretending everything's fine only deepens the damage. She looked directly into the camera. I love my country. That's why I speak up. If I didn't care, I'd stay quiet. But staying quiet has never helped women. Not here, not anywhere. The audience clapped. Some stood. Emma nodded, impressed. Karoline, your response? Karoline's posture was upright, confident but calm. I respect Megan's passion, she began. But passion without responsibility is just noise. Yes, the world watches us. And when someone with international fame calls the president an enemy of women, that carries weight. She paused. And that weight can crush diplomacy, trust, and progress. The room quieted. I've spoken with women diplomats from Eastern Europe, Karoline continued. They've told me, we look to the U.S. for strength, not division. When they see our leaders attacking each other on TV, it doesn't inspire hope. It weakens alliances. Emma leaned in. So you believe criticism hurts our credibility? Karoline nodded. Unmeasured criticism does. Constructive debate is essential. But framing policies you disagree with as anti-women or anti-human doesn't build bridges. It burns them. Megan's eyes narrowed slightly. And what about the women who are burned by those policies, Karoline? She said, her voice steady but forceful. Karoline didn't blink. We fix those policies through process, not performance. Gasps from the audience. The word performance hit like a lightning bolt. Megan took a breath, held it, then let it out. She smiled, faintly, but her eyes held fire. Emma quickly jumped in. Let's talk global influence. Megan, your film features stories from women in Afghanistan, Venezuela, and Nigeria. What message are you hoping world leaders take from it? Megan turned slightly toward her. That women are not collateral. In war, in poverty, in policy, they are always hit hardest. I want leaders to stop thinking of women's issues as secondary. They are central to peace, progress, and prosperity. She looked again at Karoline. And that includes America. Especially America. Emma turned back to Karoline. Would you support an international summit focused entirely on women's policy and security? Karoline nodded. Yes, absolutely. But not led by celebrities, she added. Led by elected leaders, experts, people accountable to voters, not followers. The audience reaction was mixed, half cheering, half booing. Twitter exploded again. Megan leaned forward. Let me remind you, Karoline, I didn't run for office, but I've earned a voice. Not because of fame, but because I've been on the ground. I've seen what women go through. You can't dismiss experience just because it doesn't come with a campaign sticker. Karoline raised her eyebrow but didn't interrupt. Emma, clearly feeling the heat, shifted tone. Final question for this segment. Do you believe the other is dangerous to the country's direction? The room went completely still. Karoline answered first. No, Megan's not dangerous. She's passionate. But passion without clear policy can mislead people. That's my concern. Then Megan. Karoline isn't dangerous either, but silence in power is. And defending broken systems instead of fixing them, that's what holds us back. Emma exhaled slowly. Powerful words, and very different visions. The lights dimmed slightly for a transition as the next segment approached. Outside the studio, viewership had hit 26 million, higher than most presidential debates. And yet, for many watching, the real debate wasn't between Megan and Karoline. It was between two futures. The next segment opened with a shift in tempo. The studio lights dimmed to a cooler hue. The audience settled back in their seats. On a screen, a graphic read, Policy versus Personal, the Real Cost of Power. Emma Rivera leaned forward, her voice now slower, more deliberate. We've talked about ideas, principles, vision, but what about consequences? What happens when politics becomes personal, when leadership decisions change lives? Tonight, both our guests have stories to tell. She turned first to Karoline. Leave it. Karoline, before the show, your team shared that you wanted to address a personal experience tied to the current administration's policies. Can you tell us more? Karoline's jaw tightened slightly. Then she spoke. 2 years ago, she began. My cousin, Natalie, a nurse in Texas, was denied extended leave after her third pregnancy. Her hospital had cut benefits, citing new state healthcare budget reallocations tied directly to federal incentives. The room grew quiet. She suffered complications, nearly died, all because she couldn't afford a private plan and couldn't take the time off she needed. She paused. I remember visiting her in that hospital, hooked up to machines. She asked me, Karoline, does anyone in Washington even know I exist? Her voice didn't waver, but the emotion behind it was raw. That's when I decided that policies are not just numbers on paper. They're decisions about who gets to survive. A moment of respectful silence. Even Megan looked caught off guard. Emma spoke softly. That's a powerful story, and it shows how even your side, those who often defend budget cuts, aren't untouched by their impact. Karoline nodded. I'm not here to say everything my party has done is perfect, but change comes through engagement, not retreat. I joined the system to fix it, not to burn it down. Emma turned now to Megan. You've been open about personal costs too. Can you share what drove you to create voices of freedom beyond the politics? Megan's expression shifted, less polished now, more human. I had a friend named Salima, she said quietly. She was an Afghan teacher. After the U.S. withdrew, she was targeted for running a school for girls. I tried everything: calls, diplomatic channels, NGO appeals. We got her out, but not before her home was burned down. She looked away for a beat. She lost everything, and still said, "At least my daughters can read." That's what freedom means to some women. And when leaders ignore that, it's a betrayal. Karoline tilted her head, listening closely. Emma didn't interrupt. Megan continued. This isn't just about America. It's about how America behaves when the world is watching. How we treat women here echoes across borders. Karoline leaned in. And when we call our own leaders enemies on global television, that echo can be destructive too. Megan's eyes narrowed. Is it more destructive than their actual policies? A beat. Karoline didn't answer immediately. Then, it's not about who yells louder. It's about who builds better. A murmur in the crowd. Tension rippled again. Emma jumped in to pivot. Let's talk about that. Building better. If you each had one policy you could implement tomorrow, just one, to impact women most, what would it be? Karoline answered first. Maternal health reform. Fully fund rural clinics. Mandate maternal leave across all states. No woman should risk her life because spreadsheets say it's not profitable. Applause. Loud, sustained. Emma turned to Megan. Megan didn't hesitate. Education equity, globally and domestically. From Baltimore to Kabul. If a girl can read, she can fight. Poverty, abuse, injustice. She can change the world. Even louder applause. A standing ovation from some corners of the audience. Emma looked between the two women. For all their differences, both guests just gave answers that could change lives. Maybe that's where progress begins. Backstage, producers stared at the rising viewership numbers. CNN's control room reported over 30 million viewers now. Karoline and Megan didn't smile. They weren't pretending. They didn't agree. They likely never would. But for the first time all night, they looked at each other not as enemies, but as women who had both been burned by the system and who were both still standing. Outside the studio, the story was spreading faster than anyone predicted, and it was only halfway done. The tension that had calmed for a few minutes returned with new sharpness as the next segment began. The screen lit up with a fresh headline. Words that divide or unite. Emma Rivera didn't waste a second. Now, to the moment that sparked global headlines. Megan, you called former President Donald Trump an enemy of women. A bold statement. Karoline, you remained silent then. But now, I'll give you the floor. The entire studio leaned forward. Social media viewership crossed 40 million. Karoline looked straight into the camera. Her tone was even, but firm. I chose to stay silent earlier because I wanted to listen first, she began. But now, let me say this clearly. I disagree with that label, not just because I worked under President Trump, but because I believe it's dangerous to reduce policy disagreements into moral accusations. Megan shifted in her seat, preparing to respond. But Karoline kept going. You say he's an enemy of women. I understand your anger. I really do. I've read your documentary's stories. I felt the pain in them. But when we turn leaders into monsters with one word, we close the door to reform. We feed division. And we stop talking about real solutions. Some clapped. Others booed. But no one looked away. Megan responded with calm precision. Karoline, I appreciate your restraint. But words matter. Power matters. And when a leader enacts laws that take away reproductive freedom, that block funding for abused women, that silence female whistleblowers, That's not just disagreement. That's harm. Karoline nodded slowly. Then let's be honest about harm. Let's talk about the opioid crisis that grew under both parties. Let's talk about family courts where mothers fight alone. Let's talk about migrant women sexually assaulted in border camps, under Biden too. Is harm a partisan issue or a national failure? That line hit hard. A moment of pure silence fell across the studio. Emma, now walking between them, posed the obvious question. So if you're both fighting for women, why does it feel like you're on different planets? Karoline answered first. Because we don't trust each other. Not just personally, but as a society. The left sees the right as cruel. The right sees the left as fake. And somewhere between our hashtags, real women are slipping through the cracks. Megan didn't smile. But she didn't interrupt. Emma turned to her. Do you agree? Megan spoke slowly. I think we disagree on methods, not intentions. I don't think Karoline wants women to suffer, but I think some of the policies she supports cause that suffering. That's the painful truth. Karoline responded quietly. And I think sometimes the labels you use make it harder for us to fix the damage together. The moment felt fragile, like a thread stretched between two cliffs. Emma's producer whispered in her ear, "Time for the audience Q&A." Emma nodded. We're opening the floor now, and fair warning, it's live, no filters, no edits. A woman in the audience stood. Hi, I'm Priya from Michigan. I voted for Trump once. I've also protested him. My sister died after being denied coverage for prenatal care. So my question is simple. Who do I trust now? Because I'm tired of speeches. I need answers. Megan stepped forward. Priya, I'm sorry for your loss. I can't imagine the pain. And I won't give you a speech. I'll just say this. Trust the people who show up. In policies, not promises. Karoline followed. And trust your own voice. When the system fails you, don't let politicians tell you your pain is a political weapon. It's a call to action. Emma looked moved. This conversation is raw, it's real, and it's reaching people. Offstage, producers confirmed it. 50 million viewers now, the most watched political debate of the year. But this wasn't about ratings anymore. This was about two women with very different beliefs, standing in the same storm, and refusing to back down. And there were still two parts left. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted again. Not louder, just heavier. More real. Emma Rivera stood in the center of the stage as the screen behind her faded to black, then returned with bold white text. One final question. She turned slowly, facing both Meghan Markle and Karoline Leavitt. You've both talked about pain, policy, leadership. Now I want to ask you something different. Not as a journalist, but as a citizen. If the young women watching tonight are feeling powerless, torn between voices like yours, what do you want them to believe in? The silence after that question was like thunder. Megan didn't rush to speak. She inhaled deeply, then looked directly into the camera. I want them to believe in the power of their story, she said. Not everyone will have a microphone, but every woman has a truth. And no matter what side you're on, that truth deserves to be heard. She looked to her left, toward Karoline, not confrontationally, but steadily. I've told stories of women in refugee camps, in small towns, in courtrooms. I don't need everyone to agree with me. I just want them to listen. Because when we stop listening, we start breaking. The room remained still, until Emma nodded and turned to Karoline. Karoline didn't flinch. Her voice was lower now, more personal. I want them to believe in their strength, she said. Even when no one claps, even when they're told they're wrong or outdated or unpopular. The strength to think for themselves, to speak, and to stand, even if they're standing alone. She turned slightly, not toward Megan, but toward the crowd of young women seated in the audience. You don't need to hate the other side, to fight for what you believe in. You just need to know who you are, and not let politics erase that. For the first time that night, a small ripple of applause came from both sides of the room. MAGA hats and feminist t-shirts, clapping together, hesitantly. Emma's earpiece buzzed again. The control room. Go to final wrap. Viewer count over 62 million. She gave a slight nod, then turned to both women. I think tonight did something we didn't expect. We saw two voices clash, but also two truths that exist in the same country. One of you calls this a fight for justice, the other a fight for survival. Maybe it's both. Emma turned back to the camera. And maybe the real story isn't what Megan said, or how Karoline answered. It's that they both showed up, on the same stage, in the same hour, and didn't run. As the lights dimmed and the studio moved to commercial, behind the scenes the conversation was still going. Karoline, packing, her notes, turned slightly to Megan. I meant what I said. About strength. Megan, adjusting her blazer, replied quietly. And I meant what I said. About listening. No smiles, no fake embraces. But also, no war. Two women, walking, off the same stage in opposite directions. Outside, the internet exploded. Headlines flashed across every major outlet. Karoline's calm shakes Megan's fire, nation still talking. One sentence that shifted the tone of the debate. Women divided, but listening. Is this a turning point? And in living rooms across America, a quiet realization settled in. This wasn't the end of the argument. But maybe, just maybe, it was the start of a new kind of conversation. As the sun rose over Washington, D.C. the next morning, the political world had already begun to react. Newsrooms buzzed. Social media feeds overflowed with clips, quotes, slow-motion zoom-ins, and furious comment threads. Everyone had an opinion about the town hall, but no one could deny its impact. At a downtown cafe near Capitol Hill, a group of young interns gathered before their shifts. One of them, a woman in a gray hoodie with earbuds in, looked up and said, "Did you see Karoline's line about standing alone? That hit me hard." Another replied, "Yeah, but Megan's story about the factory worker?" I teared up. That was happening everywhere. Cable shows opened with dueling headlines. CNN, Truth versus Tactics, Megan's passion echoes worldwide. Fox News, Leave It stuns with one sentence, silences Markle in seconds. Al Jazeera, Two Americas, one stage, a clash of convictions goes global. But something else was happening too. Something slower, quieter. A piece by journalist Fareed Nadir went viral just after 10 a.m. on the Atlantic's website. Its headline read, "The Silence After the Roar, What Megan and Karoline Didn't Say." In it, Nadir wrote, "We expected fury. We got something else. Restraint, calculation, real pain, real conviction." In that moment when Karoline said, "You don't need to hate the other side to fight for what you believe in," she wasn't just countering Megan. She was reaching beyond the room, toward a country tired of shouting matches. Megan didn't retreat either. She stared down policy with human stories. Her argument wasn't abstract. It bled. And that made it powerful. At the White House, aides quietly analyzed the debate's reach. Even President Trump, known for reacting quickly, didn't tweet. His advisors debated whether silence was the smarter move. The Republican base celebrated Karoline's performance, calling her the new iron spine of conservatism. Democrats rallied behind Megan, calling her the voice that pierced the room. But in an unexpected twist, the largest growth came not from either base, but from undecided voters. Polls showed something shocking. Viewers who identified as politically homeless or frustrated moderates rated the event positively. Not because of who won, but because it didn't explode into chaos. Late that night, Karoline sat alone in a quiet corner of a Georgetown restaurant. Her phone vibrated, an email from her campaign manager. Subject: fundraising spike, over $2 in 12 hours. Beneath it, also, your last quote is on posters already. Stand even if you're standing alone. We may need to build on that. She put the phone down and looked out the window. Across town, Megan was in a radio studio. She'd just finished an interview with NPR. As she walked out, her assistant showed her the top trending hashtag on X, formerly Twitter. Different, but still. Here. It had been posted by a high school civics teacher from Michigan who wrote, "My students argued all class about Karoline and Megan, but they stayed respectful. That hasn't happened in months." Neither Megan nor Karoline responded publicly to each other after the event, but behind the scenes, both had begun planning follow-up appearances. One campaign, one documentary tour, two different paths, but both now watched more closely than ever. And maybe that was the real ending, or the real beginning. Because while the nation debated which woman won the town hall, what nobody seemed to notice was something rarer than victory. They listened. And that, for once, was louder than anything either woman said.